Hello. All right, great. This is a very loud mic. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming. This is a beautiful hospital, probably the most beautiful design I've ever seen. And it was a cool talk from James Magnuson. We're proud to be investors, our fund in Enhanced Games, so looking forward to seeing some of you guys there next year. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys about longevity biotech, or LongBio, and give you an overview of DeSci and how we can bring these sectors to the UAE. So in this talk, I'll discuss my own background and our fund, Long Game Ventures, how the pharmaceutical industry broke medical innovation globally, overview of DeSci and LongBio, why the future of pharma is LongBio, and how do we bring more biotech and so-called elite human capital to the UAE. So my own background, who am I? Sebastian Brunemeyer. I ask myself this question every day in the mirror, who am I? The purpose of this talk, I'm a scientist by training, longevity scientist. I've done hardcore biochemistry research at these various institutions, transitioned into biotech and venture capital some years after that. We ended up putting a couple drugs in the clinic. We raised a lot of money, and we're deploying capital now in longevity biotech and regenerative medicine. So I've been hanging around the DeSci space since the early days. I've been an advisor to these organizations you see here, and you'll hear more about these later today. If you want to know more about what I do, you can check out some of these talks on YouTube, where I go into depth on longevity biotech. Okay, a bit about our fund, Long Game Ventures. We focus on longevity biotech and regenerative medicine. We invest primarily in therapeutics that have the potential to extend human lifespan by over 10 years. You can see some of our portfolio companies here, including the Enhanced Games not shown. And two of our portfolio company founders are here at the conference today, Parasite and Oshin Bio. The formatting's a little messed up, sorry about that. If you want to know more about the LongBio field, some colleagues and I put out this report earlier this year about the top 50 companies in LongBio, and we have in-depth profiles about them. Okay, so kind of zooming out, I prioritize health above wealth. So Warren Buffett, presumably richer than most of us in the room, said I would give up all of my money to be young again in a heartbeat. So this baby shown here, or really any baby is better off than the Warren Buffett that society so celebrates. And when you're really sick, the money won't bail you out, sadly. So currently, no amount of money can meaningfully extend lifespan once you have one of these terminal age-related diseases. And we need to invest in innovation now because there's a long lead time. It takes 10, 20 years from the science to get to the bedside in the clinic today, although we're working on mechanisms to speed that up. So as you're probably aware, aging drives 90% of the disease burden, particularly in the West today, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, etc. The good news, though, is that we can slow the aging process. There's a new field called geroscience. There are hundreds of labs all over the world developing new medicines that slow the aging process. So here's an example. These are mice that are the same age. One was treated with a longevity drug, and the other was not. And the one that was not treated, you can see, has arthritis, thinning fur, hunchback, cataracts. And this is not a one-off case. We have hundreds of examples of different types of interventions that slow the aging process. So this has become pretty urgent, the need to slow aging, because of the silver tsunami, this global demographic aging crisis. So no government has a credible plan to deal with this. And this is 100% guaranteed to occur. It's baked into the cake. You might worry about climate change or global war, things like this, but those are not 100% guaranteed to happen in the way that demographic aging is. So you can see here in the year 2010, the countries in red are those where over 20% of the population is older than age 65, retirement age. So it's Western Europe and Japan. But if you fast forward to the year 2050, it's basically the entire developed world is in this aged state. And this has never been seen before. And government budgets are basically built on a Ponzi scheme where you have more young people coming in to support the burden of the old in terms of healthcare and pension costs. So this is a ticking time bomb. So some good news is biological immortality has existed for almost 3 billion years on this planet. There was a Nobel Prize awarded to Shinya Yamanaka and John Gurdon some years ago for a technology called iPSC, induced pluripotent stem cell technology. You take skin cells of basically any age, 100-year-old person cells, you can turn them into day zero embryonic stem cells. So we can reset the biological age of these cells. And if you can reset the biological age in a cell, humans are just agglomerations of cells, and therefore we should be able to rejuvenate the whole organism. It's just an engineering challenge, although it's a very difficult one. So we've known about this for a long time. It's called germline immortality. The great developmental biologist August Weismann talked about this, and it's illustrated by the fact that people of any age, say maybe in your 30s, will have children that are always brand new, always day zero. How does that work? And actually, the sperm and egg cells and their progenitors in your body were inherited from your parents' body. It was in their sperm and egg, and their parents before them, and their parents. So you can actually trace this immortal lineage all the way back to the dawn of life on this planet. So here's actually an image of these cells, these immortal germ cells. Here's another shot, sometimes called the God cell, the totipotent pluripotent stem cell, embryonic stem cell. And as I said, if you can rejuvenate cells, you should be able to rejuvenate the whole organism. All right, so geroscience is a new paradigm of research, and LongBio will be the future of pharma. So you may be aware, especially doctors in the room, that there's an exponentially increasing risk of disease, age-related disease, such that even if we cured cancer, all types of cancer tomorrow were cured, on a population level, it would only extend healthy lifespan by 2 or 3 years before something else would get you, like heart disease. And so really the only way we can extend population lifespan is to slow the aging process itself. All right, so traditional pharma gives you some extra years generally at the end of life. They're not high quality years. 90% of medical costs are in the last couple of years of a patient's life. What we're aiming to do in the LongBio field is simply add healthy years. And this is really good for the economy because people can work for longer and they drain the healthcare system coffers less. I liken the geroscience or LongBio medical revolution to the dawn of antibiotics. At the turn of the 20th century, the #1 killer was bacterial infectious disease. And if you were to approach doctors or scientists and say, hey, you know the disease that's killing everybody right now, bacterial infection? Well, that's not going to be killing most people. In just a couple decades, we're going to have these magic bullet pills, antibiotics. Nobody would have believed you if you had told them that at the time. And similarly, I think we are about to bring aging under medical control, to use the phrase of Aubrey de Grey, who sort of pioneered the field. And this progress of late is thanks to the research efforts of many scientists for half a century, understanding the molecular biology and biochemistry of aging. So you can see sort of a simplified diagram of some of the processes that are going on: DNA damage, nutrient sensing, senescence, epigenetics, etc. Some more good news is that there are now, this is out of date, over 100 interventions that extend lifespan in mice and across species: yeast, worms, flies, fish, mice, at the genetic level and the pharmacological level. So we know it can be done through a lot of different mechanisms. So the science is in. We also show the quantum of lifespan extension by some of my favorite interventions shown here, and we have invested in a bunch of companies targeting these mechanisms. So one of the reasons why LongBio as an investor is more attractive than traditional pharma is because the market has not realized that the success rate, the clinical trial success rate of LongBio drugs is going to be higher than traditional pharma. And this is because we rely less on these contrived, fake animal models of disease that the industry focuses on. For example, Alzheimer's disease in mice, what we do is we take a mouse, genetically engineer it so it expresses a whole lot of a protein called amyloid beta, and it destroys the brain. And we say, oh, look, that's kind of like Alzheimer's in humans. We can cure the disease in the mice, but in humans, it doesn't work. And this applies across all different diseases, cancer, cardiovascular disease. The industry and academics are happy to focus on these contrived fake animal models of disease. What we do in the LongBio space is we actually give these drugs to normally aging, not genetically engineered, not contrived animals. And if we can extend their lifespan, increase their robustness, their physical function, their cognitive function, and they're younger in every way that we check, that is much more realistic to the human case. And it's much more likely to work for many different age-related diseases, not just one. And you can label expand. So one of the examples of one of the mechanisms that we use to slow aging is cellular senescence, ablating senescent cells, these zombie cells that accumulate. With age, we can actually delete them and it extends lifespan. I showed you this graphic. This is from a small molecule approach. Another cool one is heterochronic parabiosis. This is kind of an interesting vampire type one where you surgically link the circulatory systems of a young and an old mouse so that they share blood. And the young mouse gets older and the old mouse gets younger. And before you start trying to bribe your younger cousin for their young blood, realize that we're developing drugs that mimic these effects. Plasmapheresis is based in large part upon this work. So another cool drug in the space is called rapamycin. This was covered in Bloomberg pretty recently. Does a real anti-aging pill already exist? This incredible story of how the drug was discovered in Rapa Nui in Easter Island, and the heroic chemist Raghav Sahgal, who working at a pharma in Canada was instructed by his superiors to destroy the soil sample that they got this drug from. But he said, you know what, there's something special about this molecule. So he stashed it in his freezer for years. And it later was developed separately and later became an FDA-approved drug that's instrumental in organ transplant. It suppresses the immune attack on a donor organ and other applications. And it is the best studied longevity drug today, so we can see significant lifespan extension in studies performed by the US government at the NIH. So zooming out, giving you an overview of the LongBio ecosystem, my colleague Nathan Chang, the invincible Nathan Chang, keeps a list of all of the LongBio companies and investors in clinical trials on longevityList.com. Check it out. He's seeing an exponential increase in the number of companies referring to themselves as LongBio companies. You can see the database here. He keeps track of investors and trials and companies. Here are just a few of the investors in this space, and more coming in every day. This I call my social proof slide. So these are the smart cookies who are currently investing in the space, from billionaires to famous VCs, people you in the audience will know: Peter Thiel, Balaji, Vitalik, Brian Armstrong, et cetera. Marty Chavez, Goldman Sachs CFO, is an investor in a company I co-founded. Stanley Druckenmiller as well. Scott Bessent, who's now the Treasury Secretary of the US government, actually invested in the company I co-founded. So really smart people are investing in LongBio, so I'm pretty optimistic about the near future. Here's a snapshot of a couple of companies in this space. This is by far not a complete list. Some of them went public. So here's a little bit of a timeline. So you can see in 2013, Google launched a company called Calico with $3 billion, a partnership with AbbVie. The CEO is the legendary Genentech CEO, one of the biggest, most successful biotech companies in history. We launched Apollo Ventures in Cambrian around that time. We've accumulated about $500 million in capital. Altos Labs launched with $3 billion. This was the largest seed financing in history at the time. Now it's been surpassed by some bubblicious AI companies. They have Shinya Yamanaka, the Nobel laureate of Japan, backed by very prominent groups. Evolution, we'll talk about in a minute, was launched by Saudi Arabia, $1 billion a year to deploy into the LongBio space. Not to be outdone, ARPA-H, the US government, created a government program to deploy $2 billion a year target into advanced breakthrough sort of moonshot biotech. And then BioAge has IPO'd with the most blue chip of biotech VCs and a partnership with Novartis. So these are just a few of the events in recent years. So I mentioned Evolution. They do a cool conference every year in Saudi. They're aiming to deploy $1 billion a year, hired a bunch of prominent longevity scientists, including some colleagues of mine from Apollo and Cambrian. So what I would propose humbly to the UAE government is to not be outdone by the Saudis and deploy $2 billion a year into longevity. I think we have the raw ingredients necessary. So give you a very brief overview of biopharma, just because we're short on time. I'll whip through these slides. This is what I call a wiring diagram of the industry, how it all connects together. We can zoom in. So all the money comes from the public. It goes through taxes to government funding entities, universities, biotech startups, and then VCs fund these companies and spin them out. And then we get our capital also from private LPs, and public markets invest in biotechs and pharmas. The data goes through CROs, it goes to payers, insurance companies, and ultimately doctors who prescribe. So to quote Jürgen Drews, head of R&D at Roche, one of the most sophisticated big pharmas, biotech is taking up what pharma is neglecting, carrying out future-directed research, attacking the root causes of disease. I would argue there's nothing more at the root cause of disease than aging itself. And David Baltimore, president of Caltech and Nobel laureate, said regarding the biotech revolution in the 90s, pharma was asleep at the wheel, unable to appreciate molecular biology and unable to take advantage. And this gave rise to companies like Genentech. So some more bad news. Pharma is getting exponentially worse at their job. So their R&D efficiency is declining. There is a term coined by Jack Scannell, who is an advisor to Bio and to Healthspan Capital. He pointed out that we have an exponential decline. It's the inverse of Moore's law. And how is this possible? Because all of the input tools, all of the omics tools and drug discovery tools are getting exponentially better. How are we getting so much worse? Or how is pharma getting so much worse? There's some more data showing that their rate of return is lower than their cost of capital. So for every dollar that pharma spends on internal R&D, they're actually burning that money. This is a little spicy. The idea that big pharma intentionally or unintentionally has restructured the pharmaceutical industry to suppress competition. And basically every big incumbent industry does this. Economists call this erecting barriers to entry to competition. So you make it very complex to comply with thousands of pages of regulations, make clinical trials very expensive so only pharma can afford them, make it extremely illegal for doctors to deviate from the government-determined standard of care so they can't do clinical research very easily. Biotech companies have to rely on a small number of VCs or pharma to afford these late-stage trials. The manufacturing and marketing are extremely expensive as well. And the biggest problem is that pharma, FDA, and the government hold the same religious groupthink dogmas, like the amyloid hypothesis that I just mentioned. So another issue is that the NIH budget is falling in inflation-adjusted terms. This is the #1 funder of biomedical research globally. And research ideas that are getting funded are less and less original, more incremental. So some data from Andrew Lowe's group showing that in the year 2000, the best-selling 30 drugs, only 13% of them came from academia and biotech versus big pharma. You fast forward to 2018, the best-selling drugs, 80% were from small biotechs and academia. That's good for VCs and not so good for pharma. Check out Andrew Lowe's work. at MIT for more info on this. All right, so speeding through DeSci, you'll hear a lot about this today. Victor Hugo said there's no force more powerful than an idea whose time has come, and that's DeSci. So the case study is Bitcoin. People ridiculed Bitcoin. Now we have Larry Fink, the largest asset manager in the world at BlackRock, sort of bending the knee to Bitcoin. Their largest ETF is Bitcoin. So it went from 0 to 100,000 in about 15 years. 600 million people hold Bitcoin. It is effectively digital gold. It is the closest thing we have to the perfect form of money yet. And it will probably, or something like Bitcoin, will eventually become the global reserve asset. You can see in comparison to, it's worth about $1 trillion or so, comparison to the other largest assets today. So our shadow emperor, Peter Thiel, who I'm actually a big fan of, said the crypto revolution is as important as the internet itself. So what if all capital markets move on-chain, we tokenize all assets, including biotech equity and IP? Okay, the formatting somehow is messed up. I sent a PDF, but you never know. Just imagine that there's a whole lot of different companies and organizations in the DeSci space. And the next slide too. So there are different layers of execution. Somebody else will talk about that later. All right, so we have VitaDAO. Pfizer Ventures, the big pharma, Pfizer led the last financing round. It's backed by, or supported by Bob Nelson, one of the biggest VCs in America at Arch Ventures, Balaji of the network state, Vitalik, inventor of Ethereum, et cetera. And this is a very cool DAO focused on longevity. But there are more DAOs. These are sort of almost like venture funds on the blockchain, targeting all kinds of neglected or underappreciated scientific areas you'll hear more about. So the DeSci future looks like this. Capital markets go on chain. Investors fund early stage research. You can fractionally trade shares in IP. Technologies are liquidly traded, faster company formation. Biotech equities and deep tech in general are tokenized. This bridges the valley of death of venture capital. And most importantly, you let 1,000 flowers bloom in terms of ideas. A diversity of ideas get funded rather than just the Kool-Aid and groupthink. So I think this will be as monumental historically as the dawn of the stock market itself, as we saw in 1602 Amsterdam. All right, the last chapter is on healthcare sovereignty for the UAE, and I'll go pretty quickly here. So the whole world relies on the US and the FDA. This is a huge bottleneck. They only approve about 50 new drugs a year. The next generation of drugs are going to be gene and cell therapies, not small molecules and simple biologics. These are extremely powerful. Many are potentially curative, but they don't really ship well. You want to produce them locally, and a lot need to be individualized to the patient. In times of global trade chaos, it's critical to control your supply chain. So Mubadala Bio is a new organization created by the Sovereign Wealth Fund to do manufacturing, and we have M42 doing hospital infrastructure. But in UAE, we're still missing that early stage biotech ecosystem, the R&D and drug discovery. So it would be very cool if we brought biotech and pharma R&D to the UAE. It's a very high margin export business. So Switzerland, 40% of their exports are pharmaceuticals. And the coolest thing is we could make therapies available sooner in the UAE than anywhere else in the world. Imagine how interesting that would be if people from all over the world were flying here to get the drugs first. It's already a huge hub for medical tourism, and so we should double down on that. And one investment structure you could do is you invest in the equity of these companies. You also buy warrants, which give you the option to purchase more stock at a later date. You perform a clinical trial here in UAE. If the data look good, you exercise the warrants to buy more of the stock. And after a phase 1b study in a small number of patients, you do what Japan does, and you allow commercial marketing with post-marketing surveillance trials. So it becomes available so much sooner than the 10-year period we normally wait. I mentioned Japan. Japan has done this in the stem cell space. They're deploying over $1 billion a year after their Nobel Prize in the stem cell area. So it would be very cool to offer therapies not yet available elsewhere in the world. We create a conditional approval system like Japan has, and actually some states in the United States are doing right to try legislation. So under certain conditions, you can get access to drugs that are still in clinical development. You don't have to wait 10 years for them to be available. And we can also do private market regulators rather than a single government bottleneck. And this is an important concept. There's this invisible graveyard. So let's say there's a drug that saves 100,000 people per year, and it takes FDA 10 years to get it approved. Well, that's 1 million people who died waiting for a drug to get approved. So a lot of these patients simply can't wait. They don't have time. So there's a new organization I'm working with called Eden Longevity that is aiming to be a conduit to bring access to these therapies sooner. All right, final chapter, super quickly. Elite human capital. What determines the success of nations and companies, as McKinsey pointed out, is the quality of the people you have working there. And there are some interesting, perhaps spicy frontier biotechnologies, some of which we've invested in, you'll hear more about today, that I think will dramatically increase the quality of human capital. Embryo selection is one, IVF, you'll hear about that shortly. Genius cloning, not talked about a lot, but this is an inevitability. And human genetic germline engineering is also coming. And so with these technologies, we could eliminate all genetic diseases very quickly. We could boost IQ by about 5 points per generation. And eventually with genetic engineering, we could cure most diseases. So you'll hear from Professor Jonathan Anomaly, his company Herosite, which we're happily investors in, doing IVF embryo selection, polygenic scoring. It's been supported by Elon Musk. Peter Thiel has also invested in the space. It's very hot in Silicon Valley right now. They were profiled by CBS News just a couple weeks ago on selecting for IQ, and you can do many other traits as well. Here's a chart of national IQ versus GDP per capita. It's a pretty strong correlation. There's a book you should read called Hive Mind, Why Your Nation's IQ Matters So Much More Than Your Own. And with respect to cloning geniuses, we've found throughout history that geniuses are responsible for most of the major breakthroughs throughout history. Most of us normies don't really move the needle. It's all about the geniuses. And if you had 1,000 copies of von Neumann, it doesn't matter which country that is, that country will soon become the most advanced in the world. And of course, we have Donald Trump, the president, the greatest president of all time, tremendous. A lot of people say he's a genius. A lot of people say it. And I heard that he's going to buy the Cleveland Clinic. He's going to call it Trump Clinic. We're going to put a beautiful, beautiful golf course right in front. It's going to be a big, beautiful golf course, believe me. So anyway, we'll have to figure out who we clone, all right? But I would suggest some of these scientists first. All right, so there's a normal distribution of IQ. It's really the true elite. There's a power law distribution who actually make any significant contribution. So genius cloning is inevitable. I think by 2050, the biggest national security issue is not going to be AI. It's going to be the genius baby gap. You've heard of the Soviet missile gap. Well, we're going to have a genius baby gap, and China is almost definitely working on this already. So in conclusion, if the 20th century was a century of physics, the 21st will be the century of biology, according to Craig Venter, who sequenced the human genome. Steve Jobs, you've heard of, said, the biggest innovations of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. And so thank you everybody for listening. If you want to get in touch with me, add me on LinkedIn. If you want to invest in our fund, send me an email. I just moved to the UAE in winters, so I don't know a lot of people here, so I'm keen to connect if you want to hang out and learn more about what we do. So yeah, I for one feel very fortunate to be in the LongBio space. I think it's the coolest area of biomedical science. Hopefully I've convinced you of that. And yeah, thank you again for listening and looking forward to the conference.